Class of 2015, you are watching this screencast if you want to get to know a little bit more about ethos, one of our three appeals that we have been talking about. So here we go. What is ethos? Well, Lunsford describes it as the rhetor's so-called presentation of self. That is how the speaker or writer presents themselves to the audience at hand. Essentially, it's just your credibility or your trustworthiness. You're answering the question, why should I listen to or read what this person has to say? It's the rhetor's responsibility to really give a good answer to that question. Your audience is going to be trusting you, so don't let your audience fall, okay? Really allow them to be able to trust you and give you credibility. Don't do this. Okay, so how to establish ethos? First, actually be knowledgeable about the topic of which you write. So in your argument essays, really understand what argument you're making and why you're making it. Also, state your values and personal experiences if you think that that's going to be important both to your audience and to the topic at hand. We've seen this a lot, reference symbols, religious icons, historical figures, respected individuals, and that allows you to, quote-unquote, borrow some credibility. So we saw that especially with the Marco Rubio speech where he made a lot of references to God and the American way of life being centered around God and religion. Also, as we saw with speeches like Martin Luther King Jr. and Barack Obama, that rhetors can often carry in some intrinsic authority. That is, they already have a reputation established, so that allows them to have ethos right off the bat. So what could this look like, especially now that you're writing your papers? So here are some examples. A recent debate over the future of the American dream has caused quite a controversy. Polls show a majority of Americans actually believe the American dream is now impossible to achieve. So you're quoting some statistics, you're summarizing the debate, it appears as if you know what you're talking about. Here's the next example. As a first-generation immigrant whose parents made a difficult and brave journey from Guatemala, questions of whether the American dream still is possible or not hit especially close to my heart. This is relating relevant personal experience. This is allowing the audience to trust you because you are saying the American dream is really important to you because of your family history. Iconic American figures from Thomas Jefferson to Martin Luther King Jr. have had something to say about what we now conceive of as the American dream, bringing in famous, reputable people to add to your own argument, thereby borrowing some credibility. Okay, these are all examples, the likes of which you could possibly use in your own papers. Okay? On the opposite side, how do you undermine your ethos? Well, if you frequently attack the opposing view, this makes you look weak. Okay? Try to focus on your own argument and then logically respond to opposing views in a calm manner. Also, if you claim you're an expert when in fact you're not, that makes you look not credible. Okay? This is going to be especially difficult for you writing this paper because you are teenagers and you may not actually, in fact, be super big experts on this topic, but you have done a lot of readings about the American dream. So you do have some history and readings to go with it. Quoting other reputable individuals out of context, or if their words really have no relevance to your argument, we're going to see an example of that in just a second, but really be careful about how you quote people and don't quote them out of context. And then also being vague about who you're citing. This happens a lot in commercials, where people will say, experts say this is the best toothpaste on the market, and they don't really say who the experts are. So subtly that undermines your credibility. So what this could look like, undermining your ethos. Saying things like this. Some people claim the American dream to be an illusion, an argument that is obviously insane and baseless. Okay, that seems like an attack, and it is, and that in fact puts the spotlight back on you and makes you look weak and not credible. Here's another example. I've done a lot of reading about this, so I can say without a doubt that the American dream is still an inspiration. Phrases like that, without a doubt, are really a fine line between staying credible and not. So be careful when using words like that. And just doing a lot of reading on something doesn't necessarily make you an expert. Here is an example of trying to borrow credibility out of context. Winston Churchill said, "We shall fight on the beaches, in the hills, in the streets." And that is what any good American should do for the American dream, fight for it. But Winston Churchill, when he said these words, was actually talking about the British trying to fend off the Germans during World War II, and that's not necessarily analogous to Americans fighting for the American dream. So it's really a misuse of ethos here. And then here's a final example. Plenty of experts and respected individuals believe the American dream to be dying, which makes it hard for me to argue against that fact. Okay, who are these experts? Who are these so-called respected individuals? It would be much better if you actually had specific quotes from historical people, from politicians, and from anyone else important that you think would have something to say about this. So, what does this mean for your paper? Hey, well, remember, you are writing for an adult audience who reads Time magazine, so you are going to have to, in some ways, establish ethos with an adult audience, even though you're a teenager. So how do you do that? You may not have intrinsic authority like Martin Luther King Jr., granted, but you can still establish ethos by relating relevant personal experiences. Okay, so talking, especially if you have the American dream in mind and it really hits close to home for some reason, that gives you ethos. Or really knowing your topic well. So really diving into these readings that we've had over the past 2 weeks, really comparing and contrasting them, quoting outside research, really going into depth with numbers and statistics, that makes you look knowledgeable. Or borrowing credibility from other more historical and political sources. This is what a lot of you are going to have to do. Quote liberally from Martin Luther King Jr., James Baldwin, Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson. Anyone else that we've read or that you've read in history class will make you look credible. Okay, so here are the key takeaways. This is your presentation of self. This is making you look credible to the audience. You're going to have a hard time establishing intrinsic authority with adult audiences. So relate personal experiences, know your topic well. That's how you're going to establish credibility. Avoid using random quotes. Don't cite vague authorities. Be specific, and really try to avoid or refrain from just flat out attacking the opposing views. Okay? I hope you enjoy this. Use this information. You can go back and look at this again. And that is Ethos for today.